This morning, we get word that China announces 84% tariff on U.S. goods in showdown with Trump, okay? And Europe also hits back. You'll obviously give a little bit more intel on this. Then the president, do you have the Europe one here as well, Rob, or no? Let me see on the story you were just on.
Yes, this has Europe in here as well.
If you can go a little bit lower, let's see what Europe's is. Europe Union announced it would begin collecting retaliatory duties on U.S. imports starting Tuesday. Okay. All right. And that's fine. So now if you go back to Trump's tweet, here's what Trump puts on Truth Social. And this is as of 2.5 hours ago, 3 hours ago. Based on the lack of respect that China has shown to the world's markets, I am hereby raising the tariff charge to China by U.S. to 125% effective immediately. At some point, hopefully in the near future, China will realize that the days of ripping off the U.S. and other countries is no longer sustainable or acceptable. Conversely, and based on the fact that more than 75 countries have called representatives of the U.S., including Department of Commerce, Treasury, and the USTR, to negotiate a solution to the subjects being discussed relative to trade barriers, tariffs, and currency manipulation, and non-monetary tariffs, and that these countries have not, at my strong suggestion, retaliated in any way, shape, or form against the U.S., I have authorized a 90-day pause and a substantially lowered reciprocal tariff during this period of 10%, also effective immediately. Thank you for your attention to this matter. He posts this. Immediately, the market, Rob, if you can go to the market responds accordingly. Go to the 1 day. The 1 day ends up being 3,000. That was up 3,000, nearly 8% in a single day, right after the announcement is made. You can tell that, Rob, if you can do that again, that was great. He makes the announcement there at 37,941. Boom. The rest of the day ends up being nearly 3,000 today. So for you, with this back and forth, this is your world. This is what you do as an economist and somebody that's watched the quantitative easing, and now we're doing a little bit of quantitative tightening that's going on. We'll show that as well. What do you think is going on here? Is this good news? Is this over with? Is China going to come to the table? What do you think?
Well, the question is for who? Good news for who or bad news for who? Certainly the markets take the viewpoint, that this is good for most of the countries. So stock markets are up not only in the US, but also in Europe and any market that's open. And actually you wonder, because really what's happened is President Trump, who previously had this longest list of countries, that were faced with these new tariffs and partly extremely high tariffs in one go, the longest ever, I think, has been announced in one go. Mm-hmm. But they're now gone. It's all back to a minimum of 10%. Some were at 10%. The UK was 10%. And which one is left over? China. So you're really now pinpointing, zooming in on China. And clearly, China is the target now. The question is, was this now caving in to the market pressure? Because there's been relentless selling last week, relentless also Monday, Tuesday. And, that really created a lot of pressure. At Treasury, they were quite concerned, and there were some voices at Treasury saying, and actually, there was this announcement, I think it was on Monday, that there will be a 90-day reprieve, which was then denied by the White House. Said, no, that's not true. That's a rumor. You see, so clearly it's being proposed by somebody, perhaps from Treasury. Why don't we do this? And now it's become policy. Well, we can't know. We can only guess and speculate exactly how it came about. But the result is clear. Trump has made a major statement, last week on this Liberation Day, on these tariffs, and certainly woke up the whole world. Like, they're paying attention to what he's saying and what the U.S. is doing. That's for sure. So he clearly got that attention. And as he said in his tweet and his message on Truth Central, so many countries have got in touch with the U.S. and they're saying, hey, let's make a deal. That's, of course, what he wants. So in that sense, you could say, well, it's worked. They all coming, crawling back to the US saying, oh, yeah, okay, we realize we did have some tariffs on you guys and you wanted to have a level playing field, so fair enough, let's come to a deal. And in many ways, that was clearly the goal. Of course, you need to get those deals worked through and signed and, done and dusted, so we're not there yet. But he's got the reaction. They know he can be very serious. And if they don't negotiate properly, it will become serious again. There's no doubt. So in many ways, and I think that was in favor of this idea that, hey, let's have a reprieve because you've got everyone's attention. They want to negotiate. Negotiations can be tricky, can take a bit of a while. So why don't we have this reprieve? And I can imagine when somebody suggested that, perhaps from Treasury, I'm speculating here, but I'm sure President Trump's response was, but not China, surely. We can't let China off the hook. I'm not going to let China off the hook. Right?
What do you think is going to happen with this? I mean, meaning, earlier today I tweeted something out. I said, this is really going to come down to one of three things, right? Who needs who more, okay? And then, right there, zoom in if you could, Rob. Who needs who more? Who has more leverage? And then who has more time, right? So when you look at the two here, back and forth, 84, 104, 125, who do you think can tolerate this pain long enough until the other has to cave?
It's a tricky question. We're talking about the number one and the number two economies in the world. We're not talking about, say, the U.S. negotiating with the UK or, some other, lesser ranked economy in the world. It's number one and number two. And of course, by some measures, purchasing power parity measures, China could be considered number one in some way, and obviously that's disputed. But so it's a big thing. This is a big thing. Now, timing is important because had this happened only 10 years ago or 15 years ago, China clearly would have been in a much weaker position, and it would have been, from a U.S. viewpoint, strategically much better to have it done then. And interestingly, if you go back to some of the old interviews that Donald Trump in those days gave, there's one I saw from 1988.
Oprah Winfrey.
Amazing. Yeah. And he's already saying, hey, we got to have some proper tariffs. There's some unfair things going on. We're paying, our products are being, faced with this tariff wall as they're trying to export to other countries. We need to do this. And of course, that would have been, for some countries, a brilliant time, even for the following decades vis-a-vis China, because China was still building up its industrial strength. Now, it's not so obvious. The answer to your question is not so easy because China is now in a very strong position, clearly stronger than 15 years ago or 10 years ago. And also it has other trading partners. The U.S. remains, and this is the strong side from the U.S. viewpoint, and that's what President Trump, of course, is very, very much aware of and is playing on. The U.S. remains the number one desirable market to export to. There's no doubt about that. And of course, that gives the U.S. a strong hand. And that's the whole point of this, this way of bringing about trade negotiations. But having said that, China does have options. We've had, in the last 10 years, increasingly, rapidly, an expansion of an alternative network, the BRICS groups of countries. And in fact, the BRICS has grown. More and more countries have joined. Also, China has set up this Shanghai Cooperation Organization. And there is the Belt and Road Initiative, which recently, celebrated its 10-year anniversary last year, where more than 150 countries signed up, and they are in bilateral arrangements and deals with China. So China has other options. But of course, as a single market, the U.S. remains number one, also for China, the most attractive single market. With the others, you have to aggregate a lot of countries to get anything close to what the U.S. offers. So it's quite balanced. And I think that's what the Chinese response also shows. Why have they been so, disrespectful is how President Trump puts it. But clearly not very accommodating, let's say. Okay, why? They seem very self-confident.
Who's they? U.S.?
Sorry, China. So
Yeah.
China has not been accommodating and has been quite aggressive in its response, unlike other countries, has not been accommodating, and has immediately said, we're not going to be pushed into a corner. We're just going to do the same. We're just going to have higher tariffs on the U.S. products and so on. And so now we have this very aggressive bilateral mutual raising of tariffs, which will kill off trade between these two major economies. And that will, even if everything else now is fine, everyone gets a deal and things will be sorted out with all other countries, that still will have a negative impact on global trade and reverberations in many sectors, whether it's shipping or whether particular industries where China is a necessary partner, rare earths and various actually even inputs that other countries need, not to mention final products that we've been getting quite used to buying from China. So this trade war has become, at the moment, with this 90-day reprieve, very focused on just the U.S.-China trade war, if you want. And in that sense, and markets take a view of, okay, that's much better than before with all these dozens and dozens of countries, but it still remains an issue. If that continues to escalate, it will actually hurt the world still. And yeah, your question, who's got who's got more time, who's got more leverage? It's fairly evenly balanced. On some things, the U.S. is stronger. On some things, China has built up a very formidable position.
What are we stronger in? We have the best customer base. We have the best buyer base. I just looked up right now, China's top 10 biggest trade partners. Number one is U.S., roughly $600 billion. Hong Kong, $297. Japan, $308. South Korea, $328. These are big numbers.
Yeah.
Vietnam, $260. Germany, $202. Netherlands, $110. India, $138. Malaysia, $212. And Russia, $245. Right? So it's not like U.S. is 50% of the trade. It's not. Okay? How much total trade does China do in 2024? How much was their total trade? What was China's total trade in 2024? China, 6.1 trillion. Okay. Of the 6.1, so if you divide what was the number I said? 582. I mean, it's 9%, right? 582 divided by 61. So if we do 582 divided by 61, 9.5%. Still a big number, but it's not 25, 40%.
Yeah. Now, of course, this is from the aggregate, 6.1 trillion imports and exports aggregated. If you say, okay, let's look at just exports, you probably get a higher figure. So, but yes, so it's not, it's not negligible either way.
So maybe check, Rob, what percent of China's export is U.S.? What percentage of China's export is U.S.?
Yeah. 15%. That's
Okay.
that sounds right.
Nowadays, more than ever, the brand you wear reflects and represents who you are. So for us, if you wear a Future Looks Bright hat or a Valuetainment gear, you're telling the world, I'm optimistic. I'm excited about what's going to be happening, but you're a free thinker. You question things. You like debate. And by the way, last year, 120,000 people got a piece of Future Looks Bright gear with Valuetainment. We have so many new things. The cufflinks are here. New Future Looks Bright. This is my favorite, the green one. Just yesterday, somebody placed an order for 100 of these. If you watch the PBD podcast, you got a bunch to choose from. White ones, black ones. If you smoke cigars and you come to our cigar lounge, we have this high quality lighter cutter and a holder for the cigars. We got sweaters with the Valuetainment logo on it. We got mugs. We got a bunch of different things. But if you believe the future looks bright, if you follow our content and what we represent with Valuetainment, with PBD Podcast, go to vtmerch.com. And by the way, if you order right now, there's going to be a special VT gift inside just for you. So again, go to vtmerch.com, place your order, tell the world that you believe the future.